Hi everyone, we'll be starting shortly. Just to introduce myself, I'm Dr. Becky and I lead the Digital and Technology Research Cluster here at the Institute of Technology Study, Institute of Development Studies. So welcoming you all today to this live event on defending online spaces. So please tweet if you're a tweeter using the hashtag defending online spaces. So we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A after we've heard from our great speakers today. So please put any questions you'd like to ask in the Zoom chat and we'll be getting to those questions afterwards. So we've got three speakers here today. Omaina Aziz, who's a volunteer at the Aurat March in Lahore. Iffat Antara from the BRAC Institute of Governance and Development at BRAC University, and Pragyna Mahpara also from the BRAC Institute of Governance and Development. And just to give you a kind of flavour of why we're here today. So we have two programs here at IDS looking at the way that the global progress on gender equality is now under threat. So we're living in an age where we've had these major political and social shifts resulting in new forces that are pushing back to reverse the many gains that we've made in recent decades for women's rights. And this patriarchal backlash is escalating globally. And one of the spaces in which we see this manifesting most violently and in such an extreme manner is in online spaces. So we're really privileged to be hosting two really important programs at IDS, which are working on countering the backlash globally. The Sustaining Power Women's Struggles Against Contemporary Backlash in South Asia program is a 5-year ESRC funded research project that looks at the backlash in Bangladesh, India, Nepal and Pakistan. And also the Countering Backlash program that's funded by CEDA that my colleagues from BRAC work on, that I also work on, which looks at the backlash in a broader context in East Africa, South Asia, Brazil and the Middle East. So both programs are carrying out engaged research, new thinking, building capacity and carrying out strategic partnerships. And both programs have done really exciting research looking at this whole issue of the online backlash. And so for our first speaker today, Omaina Aziz is a volunteer at the Aurat March in Lahore, and she's going to be talking first, and then we'll hear from our colleagues from BRAC. So Omaina, take it away.
Thank you so much, Becky. Thank you everyone for having me here. Quick disclaimer, I will be talking a lot about my experiences as a volunteer at the Aurat March, and I'll try to put it in perspective as much as I can as related to the backlash that we're seeing in online spaces in general. But this is a little bit more in particularly related to how the Aurat March sees backlash to its movement in online and digital spaces. So I'd like to begin with talking about the fact that we give a lot of credit to the internet for democratizing communication and giving historically marginalized voices a platform. This is maybe a little naive of us, as we tend to forget that these digital spaces are run, organized, and in some cases owned by the same groups of people in the physical world who have allowed the suppression of these voices in the first place. It is inevitable that the physical world with its biases and prejudices would seep into the digital world. And when that began, when I would say in a way, the internet became more and more democratized and more accessible, we started seeing those prejudices come into the digital spaces as well in the form of systematic, gendered, and violent suppression of voices. But this was being done in forms that were harder to define and pin down. So if we talk about the problem from the bottom up, how many women in Pakistan own cell phones and can access the internet on them? So that's 52% of the adult female population in Pakistan owns a mobile phone, and 21% of Pakistani women use mobile internet. These figures can sound really dismal, but we are talking about a country that's 227, I think, million people strong. And while in comparison to the global north, the percentages seem low, we're still talking about tens of millions of women we can reach online. Given that the Aurat March, just a little bit background on it, it is a collective movement which is working solely on the work of the volunteers with no organized funding or no organized resources. This access that the internet gives us is something that we really need. We're very active with physical outreach as we can be. We have developed wonderful relationships with communities outside of Lahore who include brick kiln workers, who include Christian minority communities and domestic workers. However, this is not enough to access kind of the broader scope of women in Pakistan. We do rely very heavily on our social media presence. We are present on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, the big four, so to say. So we use social media to reach out to potential volunteers. That's how I got started with the Aurat March as well, simply by responding to a post that they had put up on their Instagram. So we use social media to release our manifesto, our charter of demands, any major statements that we make addressing the government or anyone else. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And we use it to organize for protests as well by disseminating information on when it's going to be held, where it's going to be held, etc. So needless to say, the role social media plays in our outreach cannot be overemphasized. So there's a lot of effort that's put into these spaces and the content we generate for them. There is a clear difference in audience that's visible. Facebook now tends to be older and a little more conservative, whereas Instagram will have a younger audience. And thus the backlash kind of differs as well. We already see that on Facebook, we'll have older people maybe just individually hurling abuses. On Instagram, there tend to be organized pages that have kind of collaborated with one another, that come and attack videos, that report them, that leave abusive comments, that try to dox commenters, etc. Talk about that a little bit more. So we tailor our content to our audience as much as we can. So this means keeping up with whatever appears to be moving the algorithm more. What type of posts, videos, posting at any particular time, any music. But this is again an extremely vague set of criteria. And what the algorithm demands is very opaque. One of the things that can make you feel almost gaslit on social media is having around 18,000 followers on Instagram and seeing one post get engaged by about 5,000 people and another by 100. So there's no clarity by social media on what kind of posts are going to generate engagement. On YouTube as well, one notices that a certain type of dramatic thumbnail with a catchy title will gain more views. So what we see is that the tech giants appear to be pitting content creators against one another and making sure that the loudest, most obnoxious clickbait is the one that will gain the most traction. This makes it very hard for us to spread any kind of nuanced or sensitive information which requires thoughtful engagement, which is what we need. We don't want to talk about clickbait titles. We don't want to be providing content that we just need people to immediately emotionally react with. No, we want people to sit down with what we're talking about, really think about it, really do their research on it. But that becomes very difficult with social media. But the worst we face is the abuse, the misinformation, and the coordinated attacks. This was very apparent in the Aurat March of 2020. People calling themselves journalists, but simply being associated with YouTube channels with followings that range from 100 subscribers to around 2 million subscribers. They came in with the most incendiary and leading questions. So in a country like Pakistan, where the march tends to be viewed through a suspicious lens, it's called a Western agenda, the volunteers are called foreign funded agents, it pays for these YouTubers to have the most sensational videos. The more sensational a video, the more chances of it going viral. So these YouTubers would target posters that could be misinterpreted. They would talk to younger kids who wouldn't even want to talk to them. They would force them to talk and then put words in their mouths. They inflamed, they misrepresented, and then they edited their videos to present the worst view of the march that they could. They asked women to describe incidents of harassment. They asked how marital rape could exist. They pointed out the clothes of the marchers and they shamed them. Worst of all was their reckless endangerment of the marchers and the organizers. So they exposed people who were at the march, whose families did not know they were there, essentially doxing them. They spread misinformation by sharing photoshopped posters and doctored slogans and putting forward bad faith interpretations of the art pieces, all to make it look like we had blasphemed. In Pakistan, blasphemy carries the death sentence if convicted. That is the death penalty we're talking about. And unfortunately, it can often mean a death sentence at the hands of a crowd before you ever see the inside of a jail or courtroom. So, disinformation was effectively weaponized here with a malicious intent and a remarkable degree of coordination. These efforts were concentrated on endangering the lives of the participants and defaming feminism as an ideology in Pakistan. So, Twitter trends kept running along with YouTube videos accusing the march of blasphemy, and they were actively inciting violence against gender and sexual minorities for days. We reported in mass and multiple times to no avail. I don't think my words can accurately express what a dangerous and stressful time this was for us. Reporting on any and all platforms failed us on a massive scale. So, what Facebook and Instagram did, and what they do is they use freedom of expression as this kind of high ideal to essentially turn their backs on these reports coming in from gender and sexual minorities and more vulnerable groups. And what they do is they basically have turned their social media platforms into these centers where the extremist groups get together and they attack and raid feminist spaces. And their callous disregard to our reporting and their extremely disingenuous and non transparent methods of decision making, they just left us vulnerable to an extreme degree. What we've taken away from this is the tech giants sitting in Silicon Valley were happy to profit off of our content generation and our work. But as long as profits were being made, there would be no consideration of the culture, societal norms, and area specific threats in the global south to the feminist movement and to gender and sexual minorities. We simply could not rely on the owners and moderators of these spaces to afford us any protection. After a lot of deliberation, this year we took some measures to counter the orchestrated backlash and the misinformation that we faced. Now we've started taking care to watermark all of our posters. Any photos that we put up, we simply watermark them. And this way it prevents them from being doctored, from being photoshopped. And in case a doctored poster does show up, then we have the watermarked with the logo, the photos already to show, well, this is the original, what you are showing is not correct. We're basically collecting our own proofs. And all the media personnel, I'm using the term media very loosely here because this was not media personnel, this was social media shock jocks. When they wanted to cover the march, we asked them to submit forms with us with some simple questions. Have you read our manifesto? Can you even quote our theme? This way, we had some control over the people who were allowed inside the march to cover it. But despite that, what happened was this year that these journalists were exchanging media passes with one another, and we still saw some bad faith actors enter the march. And they were, when they were escorted out by the volunteers, they started yelling about consent and bodily autonomy in an effort to basically mock the slogans and the purpose of the march. Last year, we also released a statement to big tech on behalf of the Aurat March, talking about how they need to be more clear about the way they parse reports, about the kind of training that the people who look at these reports get. Are they sensitive to the kind of culture and social conversations we're having in the global south? Do they know what the cultural norms are? Do they know that simply doxing a marcher can result in loss of life? That these accusations of blasphemy are not a joke, these are actual physical death threats. So these kinds of things, we had a very big statement, we got a lot of people to sign it, but no response yet. Another threat on social media that we face is from the laws that the state itself is passing in the guise of protection and to prevent defamation. So these have not directly impacted the march yet, but we are always on the lookout for when they will come for us. how they can impact us. And of course, we have to keep a sharp eye on how they are affecting the women and minorities around us. So one is the Anti-Defamation Law. When hashtag Me Too was on the rise worldwide, with people coming forward with their accounts of being harassed and being abused, they were doing this online. In Pakistan, speaking up online in this manner could cause a defamation case to be filed against them. Their alleged abuser or harasser could simply file a case against them in Pakistan. And Pakistan, again, has a culture where women and gender, sexual, religious minorities avoid going to court. It is not a friendly space for minorities of any sort. It is a very patriarchal space. It is a space that is not trained to be sensitive to the needs of survivors and victims. It is not a space that actually even has any representation from minorities that would understand the background that they're coming from. These are spaces that everyone is told to avoid. So if a defamation case is filed against you, you are that much less likely to actually file a criminal case or to proceed with criminal, let's say, criminal proceedings against your harasser or abuser. So these anti-defamation laws are, in fact, effectively being used against the victims and survivors who are speaking out. If they speak up about the harassment or abuse they have faced, they will get hit with a defamation case. The second issue is the strengthening of the Prevention Against Electronic Crimes Act, or PICA. This has now been extended to cover all persons. At first, it used to cover all natural persons, which meant human beings. Now it covers all persons, which includes institutions. So the institutions are now protected by this law as well. And the punishment, which used to be 3 years in jail, imprisonment, and which was bailable, is now a 5-year non-bailable offense. So this also has been pushed forward as an effective tactic against gender, sexual minorities, as well as activists who are now unsure of when a joke or a tweet or an essay could land them in jail. So effectively, we see gender rights movements being squeezed from multiple directions. It begins with the troll armies and bots that are designed to harass, dox, and abuse and threaten gender and sexual minorities in online spaces. In order to mitigate this issue, we turn to the social media platforms to moderate this content, and we hit a brick wall. There is no clarity regarding their algorithm and which content is promoted, as well as no clear guidelines on how reports are handled with regards to the context of harm in the global south. This renders our reporting of the threats essentially toothless. If one then decides to take matters into their own hand and speak up to raise awareness, we encounter the third issue, which are the laws of the state, which can turn the abused into a criminal on trial. So monitoring of the content we put out, who to engage with, and the policing to an extent of our tone and words as the result of this constant fear, this is everything we stand against and protest against, and yet we are reduced to this. So every year we come up with new strategies and try to stay ahead of the game, but as we change, so do our harassers. This is why I'm so excited about this dialogue in the panel today, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from our fellow panelists on how they see this backlash and how they see it being countered effectively.
Thank you so much. That was incredibly powerful. And I'm going to share, if it's okay, in the chat, the Google Doc, which has your demands that you made of the companies. And it's really interesting to hear about the institutions where you might get redress from the government and from the social media companies, effectively either accelerating this content for profit or just completely blocking it. So who's going to go first from BRAC? Antara, was it you going first?
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Thank you, Becky. Thank you for the opportunity of speaking here, and it was very overwhelming to hear Omaina about their experiences. So we will be talking about from our research findings that we did under the Countering Backlash, Reclaiming Gender Justice research, and we did the pilot study during the period of September to November 2021, named Tracking Gender-Based Violence and Backlash Against Gender Equality in Social Media in Bangladesh. So in this research, we wanted to see what are the forms of online backlash / the violence how were they expressed, what triggers backlash, or what are the contested issues, who are the actors of here, and what are the strategies are being used to counter this backlash. So before going to our findings and all, I want to give a brief overview about our context of this research, because this violence against women in the online space it's not a completely new thing in the context of Bangladesh. And women have been facing it, I think, almost for the last decade. In a study being done in 2017 by a legal aid organization called BLAST, found that 73% of women in Bangladesh using internet faced some forms of cyber crime. But during the lockdown of COVID-19 pandemic, when everything, the education, work, our daily communication, business, everything went online, the number of internet users increased drastically. And at the same time, the social movement and activism, these also shifted to the online platforms. And when we say online platforms, it is Facebook for Bangladesh, because it is the most popular social media being used here. And almost 56% of the social media users using Facebook. So this increased using of internet also contributed to the rising rates of violence against women in the digital space. In last 1 year, I think it's in November 2020 till November 2021, during this 1 year, the Polish cyber cell for women received some 17,000 plus of cases of sexual harassment, accusation of sexual harassment. And this is only the number of reported cases only. So, and we know that talking about and filing cases of sexual harassment is still taboo in our society. So in this context, we wanted to look at the situation, the types of violence that are happening in Bangladesh. So how we did this research is we purposefully choose 3 female media celebrities based in Bangladesh who have a large fan followers in Facebook, have a public and verified profile, and are vocal about women's rights and gender justice issues in online space. So we choose people who actually also talk about women's rights in public spaces and in online spaces. So this female celebrities included 1 social media influencer, 1 journalist, and 1 veteran actress who is also a development practitioner. We tracked and analyzed their Facebook profiles, both the contents and the comment section. And we also tracked 2 national events that actually flared up on social media back in 2021 and created a mass debate on women's agency and women's rights. I want to mention here these 2 events. One was about a college-going and a teenage girl was murdered by her boyfriend, who is also a very powerful business person in Bangladesh. And another event was created when a movie actress wanted to file a sexual harassment case to the police station, and the police was not taking the case. So these 2 events and that went long and created a debate on social media, went on for months. So we wanted to also follow these events. And to track the events, we first used a software called CrowdTangle, which provided us with the statistics of interaction, time graph when the interaction was at its highest peak and at the lowest peak, when the number of followers increased or decreased, types of posts, types of interaction. And based on that data, based on that, mainly the timeline of highest and lowest peak, we used it as an entry point, and then we manually search each of the content, each of the post and comment and reaction to reach to our findings. And we also used several keywords and hashtags relevant for each profile and cases to analyze all the things. And I also want to mention here that the CrowdTangle data that we got also suggested that during the COVID lockdown period, the interaction were at the highest peak, and the interactions we got actually reflected lots of backlash. So now going to the types of backlash that we found common across the issues and person that actually occurred repeatedly. The first and most common form was name calling and labeling of women, regardless of the content they were posting. The labeling was mostly as the prostitute, targeting to their personal life choices, whether what type of clothes they were wearing, whether they're in a marital relationship or not, in a romantic relationship or not. Based on their personal lives, they would be labeled as prostitute, gold digger, attention seeker, and so on. And sometimes these often lead to, posting sexually fabricated photographs of these women in their comment section, and a graphic description and stating how they would like to have sex with these women and how they are cheap and available. And then came the sexually explicit hate comments, which also often directed to their specific body parts of these women, such as breast and vagina. And in extreme cases, these comments would lead to rape threats and publishing sexually fabricated photographs in Facebook by creating a meme or a photograph. Another form of backlash that we found was the religious and moral policing, where backlash actors would bring in religion to point fingers and criticize these women for their clothing preference, for their lifestyle, for their personal choices and opinions. For instance, our social media influencer would oftentimes be blamed for coming out in front of the camera and speaking in public without covering up. So they would label her that she's showcasing Western lifestyle, have no respect for cultural roots. Sometimes these women would be, humiliated or criticized for choosing to marry someone who might be out of the same religion or the same nationality, and would be stating that whether this is permissible in the religion or not, and would claim that she should be punished for this sin, for the grievous sin. Another major form of backlash was delegitimizing the post that advocates for women's rights, and this often came with the male validation, where male backlash actors would often define that what ideal feminism is, what is the women's rights in the context of Bangladesh, and who can or who is credible enough to speaking up on these matters. So they would be posting contents when women would post content such as, consent in sexual relationships, sexual harassment, rape, domestic violence, or marital rape. These issues are posted for public awareness, but would result in major backlash. And people would attack them by drawing on their personal life and suggested that they are not the ideal person to talk about such issues. So there would be series of delegitimizing comment, and people who support these negative comments would hit the like button. Hundreds of is posting in this delegitimizing comment, and thus the key message of the original post would eventually lost the relevance and seriousness. And finally, not last in the list, that the women would be mocked and trivialized with haha reaction on the Facebook to devalue their underlying message of how to understand women's struggle better, what the women's rights are, or to fighting the misogynistic discourse and actions of patriarchy. Even when someone took the legal action against the cyber harassment, this is not even taken seriously, and it would be delegitimized with a comment stating that filing a legal case is a waste of time. I'll briefly go on what are the contested issues or the issues that triggered the backlash. The one is choice of clothing. Women's choice of clothing is one of the most contested topics that faces backlash. These are more evident when women do not wear the clothes that conform with the traditional attires. So this discussion would lead to discourses around what the religious values and not valuing the cultural norms. The second contested issue would be the violence against women. Giving statistical fact or raising awareness against violence against women would receive the major number of reactions. So there's two kinds of reaction. One is the women followers. They would be sharing this content within their network, would comment and share their own experience of online violence, tagging other people with their network to share their stories. So this created a large amount of interaction. And the second is, of course, the negative one or the trigger, because these speaking about violence against women act as a trigger post for backlash actor. And they would make the hate comments or give a haha reaction or give an angry reaction in this post. Sometimes women would be labeled as modern women with no respect for their culture, or they have no shame because they're speaking about these sensitive issues openly in public. Because these issues are considered as much tabooed, and because the issue around mostly, I would say, the consent in sexual relationship, consent of sex, this is considered much tabooed and very much contested issue when you talk about backlash and violence. The personal life choices of women is another issue of being contested. This is also when women are very much public about their personal life, whether they are getting divorced or being a single mother. They post about these issues, that they are breaking the norm. So backlash actors would, they'll be triggered that instead of remaining silent, they are making it public. Instead of living a life of shame, they are very much visible in the public life. So they would shame them that they are not a good mother, or rather a bad mother, because they're divorced, or they're not a good woman for the society. They're bad for the society. And finally, the fourth issue that's actually very much contested in the social media, but not enough talk about, is the LGBTQ issues, because in Bangladesh, speaking on LGBTQ issues in public platform, it's very much challenging considering the safety and security of one. So not everyone is also comfortable speaking about it issue. So we find actually only one woman posted about the rights of LGBT community and showing the solidarity and support, and that actually faced a major backlash in form of either she was attacked because of her religious belief, she was labeled that she's doing it for a publicity stunt, or saying that she's supporting pedophilia, and sometimes the fan threatened that they would unfollow her. So when a social media influencer who actually have an economic aspect of her life, depending on this fan follow of her Facebook profile, and they tries to unfollow her, so it also actually impact on the economic aspect of that person. So I'll stop here and hand over to Pragyna to carry on more findings of our research. Thank you.
Thank you, Antara. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be a part of this brilliant panel and to be able to share our research findings. And this is very close to our heart because we are daily users of social media. And while conducting this research and while using social media, the question often arises that who are these people behind all the hate? Who are the people spreading hate online? And in our research, we define these people as, we term these people as the backlash actors. And we also wanted to understand that if these actors were an organized group, or if they shared any common identity, but it turns out it was very difficult tracing them because mostly they're hiding behind fake IDs, or they have their profiles locked, and those does not give us any real names or resemble any other information about them. So that's one limitation of our research, but we could access a few accounts, and those remained accessible, showed that most of the comments were actually from men and boys, aged particularly between early 20s to the late 40s. But I would also want to share that this age group might not be the same if we looked at other platforms such as Instagram, because that has a comparatively younger generation using it. But since we were looking at Facebook, this is the age group that we came across. And these commenters were not only men and boys, women too were actors and accomplices of the backlash. And these groups of people, they used a number of tactics to target the women public figures that we were tracing. And the most commonly used tactic was giving threats of reporting the contents that were being posted by them. And oftentimes it was seen that many of them, the female public figures, the contents that they had posted, they were taken down because of the massive reporting. And another common tactic was actually giving threats of unfollowing the Facebook accounts, and often actually unfollowing the Facebook accounts. And why is this harmful? Why is this risky? This is harmful for the female public figures because they are public figures. They need the large number of followers to sustain their careers. Even in social media, as a great amount of audience have now shifted in the digital space. And for instance, we track the female celebrity. She needs her movies and dramas to be promoted online to target a certain audience. And when we're targeting the social media influencer, that is her platform. Facebook is her platform to showcase her work, and flourish further in the industry. And another striking finding from the perpetrators of violence or the backlash actors were that the fake accounts were primarily used to post sexually explicit comments and rape threats. But when it came to posting and commenting on religion-based critiques and moralizing, we saw that the backlash actors were actually using their real IDs, which brought us to think that it is a pretty well thought tactic, because posting abusive comments often violates Facebook's community standards, which might get these accounts disabled. And there was also the fear that these actors feared that they might be exposed for posting such comments. On the other hand, when moralizing women using religion, it's more of an acceptable or justified in the society's eyes, and people might as well use their real IDs to do the work. And besides these tactics, they also used special characters or interchange letters while writing explicit comments, just to escape Facebook algorithm and to avoid violating the Facebook community standards. So all these tactics and backlash, but what was the reason behind it? Why the backlash? And we tried to unpack it. And it is mainly because in our society, women are central to all fundamentalist projects. And often the term ideal woman is used to control them. And this construction of an ideal woman creates a negative alternative image of what is not ideal. We call it the other woman. And this creation of the ideal to the other justifies discrimination, stigmatization, and makes women prime targets of violence. And particularly for these women who were public figures, and they do not fall under certain societal conditionings. By societal conditionings, I mean that women who do not behave, act, look, whatever, like the society had expected them to behave or act like. These were outspoken women. They were speaking confidently in front of large number of audiences on much contested issues such as marital rape, sexuality, and this was a trigger factor. This also brings out the issue of religious sentiments, where an ideal Muslim woman is expected to maintain parda and not wear certain attires in the public space. And any woman who chooses to disrupt the status quo is considered to be adhering to the ideology of feminism, which is often considered to be a Western propaganda. And this discourse around the disruption often enables backlash actors to gain massive support for their claims, often pushing women back, or in many cases manages to silence many in support of gender equality. And also there was the backlash against freedom of personal life choices, such as marriage, divorce, and bodily autonomy of women. And we figured that there is a tendency of fear amongst the backlash actors when they see women making their life decisions without being bounded by the social conditionings. It signals that they are losing control over women. And as Antara was saying, there's the factor of male validation of who can speak on what issues, and what platforms that comes in. And that leads to delegitimizing the claims of gender justice. In our cases, it was seen that a divorced woman cannot speak on mental health or psychological abuse because she might not be in the right sense of mind as she's divorced. Or a single mother cannot speak on early childhood development and parenting because she's a single mom. So this makes women who have been very publicly vocal about their claims struggle to prove their claims and survive. And in order to survive, they take a more subtle position. For instance, in our cases, we saw that female public figures particularly refrained from posting on issues around sexuality or LGBTQ rights issues. And also because protesting women's rights online, protesting against women's rights online is very easy because of the luxury of having fake Facebook accounts. One can hide behind it or log their Facebook profiles for anonymity. And in Bangladesh, these actors till date have not faced any significant legal consequences that can set an example for others, to refrain themselves from committing the same crime. And spreading hate online can also be multiplied as more people can witness and replicate these, and it becomes worse. But these women did not stop. They're using a number of strategies to counter, to sustain their presence in social media and in the digital space. Certain very popular strategy is to limit comments or limiting the comment section. And this is a very calculated step because, for instance, when they're talking about more tabooed or contested issues such as marital rape or sexuality, they would limit their comment section. And oftentimes they would filter out offensive comments, and they have also kept moderators who are handling their official and verified accounts, and they're constantly removing the offensive comments. And another bit was them highlighting certain issues that are very sensitive or contested issues with dark humor. And this was particularly seen for our social media influencer, where she was producing skits on online harassment, sexual orientation, and consent, because she might have assumed that if these messages were delivered in any other manner, these would receive more backlash. And there's also strategic responses to hate. Some respond directly to the comments with witty remarks. Some take screenshots of the comments and then post them on their social media, on their Facebook timeline, and threaten the backlash actors that they would take legal action. And some participate in different talk shows talking about how they have been harassed in social media, and make it public so that people are aware that this is a crime and this shouldn't be done. And in the cases of the national events that we looked at, we did see that lots of hashtag movements were happening, and this required strategic alliances. And these alliances were between young feminist organizations. They used hashtags demanding justice for the murder of the woman that whose case we were looking at, and they were also forming social media groups, and they were also creating social media chats and chat logs where they were strategizing on how to move forward in demanding justice for her murder, since this was talking against a very powerful businessman of the country. So that required some strategic posting from their end. So overall, women are fighting to maintain their presence in the online space, and the rapid participation during this pandemic in the internet has made online gender-based violence a very key area to look at. And since this form of backlash is very widespread and intense, this inflicts immense psychological trauma and often demotivating women to continue their presence in cyberspace. And therefore, we think this is an emerging issue that should very seriously be looked upon and be researched upon further. And I will end with this. Thank you.
Fantastic. That's really great. And just to say, you can read a blog about the ongoing research and when the final report will be coming out in a few months. So I had a question before. I'm going to take advantage of my chair's privilege and ask a question to Omaina about the algorithms. And after the march in 2021, the collective volunteers produced this fantastic set of demands, which I've shared in the chat. And one of the demands was about kind of radical transparency about the algorithms. And you talked very movingly about having to kind of construct your content so it got promoted, and then also about and then also having to kind of work around the algorithms, and also the algorithms not actually working when it comes to taking down hate speech. And we know that the platforms just don't invest in terms of content moderation outside Western Europe and the US. And I wondered if you could sort of talk to us a bit more and explain to people who might not understand these demands for radical transparency that you're asking for here.
Thank you for the question. I hope I'm able to do justice to it. So just in terms of Instagram, I'm going to speak a little bit more about Instagram because that is where primarily we've been more active for Aurat March. There tend to be certain times when apparently engagement is high. Now, when that time is, you can find out on your there's insights about your account, but really it's a hit and miss. It's not something that's very exact. You can post you can post a video that is 10 seconds long and with a certain amount of with a certain type of music playing, or it's a reel. So when Instagram has new features coming out, they tend to promote those. So this year we figured out, okay, they're going to be pushing reels. So some reels would get a massive amount of engagement and other reels would just not. And in terms of content, they would be very similar. In terms of the music playing on there, they would be very similar. And yet the engagement would vary so wildly that we just weren't able to figure out what's happening. Somehow or the other, the hate comments and the pages made against the march would be promoted so much more. Their videos would be promoted so much more. I'll give you a very personal example of this as well. On YouTube, I started listening to Pakistani music a little bit more. And after a few days, I started seeing videos. As a volunteer of the Aurat March, I started seeing videos, misogynistic videos talking about how Aurat March is a sham and the people are doing bad work. These started showing up in my recommendations. And just because I was listening to Pakistani music on YouTube. So this is what the algorithm is pushing on us. This is the state, these are the statements, and this is the ideology it wants to push on us because it knows that this will anger people, this will sensationalize everything. The culture is very strongly linked to a protective feeling towards religion and our cultural norms. And feminism is seen as something that is taking women and men away from religion and from the culture that Pakistani society has. So any videos, any content that shows this to, let's say, the general public in Pakistan, that says, oh, look at these feminists, look at this feminist march that's ruining our culture, that's taking us away from religion, that is going to get a lot of clicks, a lot of angry clicks, that's going to go viral. So they keep pushing that as well because they're out there to make money. They want the engagement. And they know that pushing any kind of nuanced conversations or any kind of educational content is not going to get them those clicks, or at least they don't assume so. They assume the worst about humanity and they push things. They push the content in that regard as well. And so they're not transparent about it. They don't tell us what they're pushing. They don't tell us how their content moderators are looking at reports and what criteria they're using to justify what is or is not something that needs to be acted on. I have spent so much of my time, I have spent hours upon hours reporting accounts and reporting comments, and not once, I've been doing this since I've been volunteering with the March, and not once to date has any one of my reports been acted on. Not a single one. And I have spent a majority of my time doing this. Apart from this, also, we are fully aware of the fact that these content moderators are not fully to blame for this because they are usually outsourced to third parties. They are overworked, they are underpaid, they are not provided any kind of clear guidelines on how to be socially and culturally sensitive. And they do tend to see the worst of humanity online. The kind of content they see, the kind of videos they see, they do burn out. They're not well taken care of. So it is very possible that these content moderators, after, I'm sorry, I'm going to say this, but after perhaps seeing a video of like a suicide or a beheading, they see a comment threatening that. They say, well, you know what? that this isn't important enough. I've seen this video where this is actually happening. These are just words. So these content moderators also really need to be taken care of. They need their mental health needs to be taken care of. The guidelines that are offered to them need to be reevaluated and to be made clear, so we all know what's happening in the background. And this is something that in our statement to big tech that we specifically asked for. We demand more clarity for them. This is another form of, again, maybe I might not be using the term correctly, but it kind of feels like another form of colonialism, where our work on social media, our content generation, is being used to make money, and yet we are not getting the support and we are not getting the kind of help that we need from them. So
that was an absolutely brilliant answer, thank you. And how disgraceful that none of your reports, and I imagine there's hundreds of them, have ever received a response. So any response on, particularly on that issue, or of attempts to get redress that you're aware of in the context of Bangladesh, and especially like that using the state, using sort of acts like the Digital Security Act in Bangladesh? Antara, have you got any kind of thoughts about this?
Yeah, so we have a Digital Security Act that was, came into action in 2017. So this law has the provision of filing a harassment case or defamation case if someone is being defamed or harassed in the online space, in social media, or using any digital medium. But unfortunately, this law hasn't been used by women or any feminist activists that much, and hasn't been proved very effective in this case. Rather, this law actually is being used in other cases of defamation, whether you are defaming, the country or any male leader or any national leader, rather than any women or feminist activist. That's problem with the law. But we also have the Pornography Act from 2012, which sometimes are being used to file cases like these, where women are being extremely harassed with sexual contents, sending porn in their inbox, or multiple comments about of rape threats, or sexually explicitly explaining about their graphic depiction of their body parts. So in some cases, women are using this Pornography Act, but that filing cases the number is still very low, and that also because sometimes it's because of the social taboo, because we are not yet not comfortable about to talk about sexual harassment or rape or the threats of rape. And partially also because of the the male dominance, the patriarchal system, because when someone have the courage to go to the legal system, they are facing multiple questions, the validation, they have to validate that yes, they have been harassed, yes, they have been exploited, or yes, they have been faced the violence. So that validation, that that number of questioning they have to face, and the legal process is very lengthy and take time, and also the mental a high amount of mental strength. So because of this, actually, not many women are encouraged to file a case. But I think we need to look at how we can make effective use of the Digital Security Act. We need to think about it. We need to do some advocacy regarding this act with the state.
And can I add a bit to that, what Antara just said? In our research, we saw that the Digital Security Act, as well as the Facebook community standards, these are formed actually to protect women and their presence in the online space when it comes to issues such as violence and harassment. But these were used by the backlash actors instead as tools to shrink their spaces. You know, they would say that you're spreading rumors about us. When our female journalists posted screenshots about the backlash actors targeting her, and when she said that she has taken legal action, we saw that the backlash actors commenting that, you know, we will file a case against you under DSA because you're spreading misinformation, you're spreading rumors. And same goes for the Facebook community standards, because we saw that their videos were getting reported, and a massive reporting ultimately resulted in, you know, taking down their contents, which were rather not harmful or did not violate any community standards. So I think this is food for thought, that, you know, how are these tools being used by whom, and how useful are these actually in countering backlash online?
I think that's really terrifying, that the very tools that are set out, the kind of legal instruments and the kind of corporate instruments that are set out to sort of defend women and defend freedom of speech, are being used against them. Any final thoughts from either of you? Just one thing that I would say is that it's really incredible that these programs have given the space for very in-depth research. So what we've been really lacking, there's been lots and lots of research that's come out of the US and out of Europe about online harm against women, but very little to date from outside those spaces. So this research is really, really important. But any final thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience before we finish? Omaina?
I saw that there was a question above regarding who these who the people are. So I'm just going to, I know we're very short on time. I'm just going to quickly talk about, it's basically a giant Venn diagram with multiple subsets of people. There are the people who simply want the clicks and the views and they want to be viral. There are the people who really believe that this is against the culture of Pakistan and we're going to destroy the country. And they tend to be kind of like overlapping. Then there is the religious right, which is extremely organized in Pakistan. And they are also extremely socially, like in social media, they're very organized and they have their spaces. They tend to be part of these people attacking us as well. And then there are some people who are very sympathetic to the state, and they tend to also, because Aurat March is very young, we've been operating for 5 years, and there's only been one party in power. So when we talk about that party, people mistakenly assume that we are against that party in particular. Any government would be in power, we'd be talking about them. So sometimes these people who are sympathetic to the state as well also get this mistaken impression, and then they start targeting us. But all of these are interconnected. That's not, I wouldn't say these are separate groups. They all have overlap with one another. And these are the people who then tend to troll us and harass us.
And some of them are women as well. I don't know that's
yes,
what
indeed.
you saw in your research in Bangladesh, but some of them are women as well. So any other kind of closing thoughts? Tara?
I would like to say that it was very different to do these kind of research, you know, where you actually get to look into social media interactions, and it was traumatizing yet fascinating, and we look forward to working on similar research because this is very close to our heart. And oftentimes me and my colleagues, we sit together, we cope up with the trauma that it gives us while researching these. And I hope we kind of develop better methodologies to understand how easily the huge amount of data that comes in can be put better to use, and conduct more research on this. So that's my thought as a researcher, and I'd like to close with that remark.
Thank you so much. Tara?
I'll go with Proka, and what I want to say is that, I mean, until very recently, we even have been considering this violence in the online space as a form of violence against women, as a form of gender-based violence. We are not considering this, even though this is actually going for a long time. Maybe now the trends that emerged, the types of, there are more types and are also still emerging this. But I'm really glad that we are addressing this as a gender-based violence as an important issue, because our life is becoming mostly online based. I mean, if not for the technology and if not for the internet, we would have this meeting in person, but we're not doing this. So now addressing this issue is actually very crucial, and we need to make this a space safe not only for women, but people of all gender and all sexual orientation, made it safe for everyone. So even though we titled it the backlash against women, we need to actually look at the backlash and the violence against all people, in people of minority, people of gender minority, people of sexual minority, people of color, and everyone actually. So yeah, thank you for bringing the issue to this platform.
I couldn't ask for a better closing statement. That was absolutely fantastic, and thank you so much to our 3 panelists and for everybody at IDF making this happen. Please do check out the IDF website and the Countering Backlash and other websites as well associated with these programs. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.